the midst of the chaos, in the midst of darkness, in the midst of utter despair, the question that people are really asking, does God even care? Does God even care? Like, you see this storm raging around us right now of culture, right? You see all of this despair. You see all of this chaos. Like, does God even care about any of this? Because a lot of people might think that God, he seems to be sleeping. In the midst of all of this cultural warfare and ideology, like all of this. And we can feel this angst and this anxiety in the midst of it. And I think the way my mind works, and the direction that I see my generation going, I'm so tempted. I don't know about you guys, but I'm so tempted to argue against the ideas of people. The ideologies that I see presenting that kind of would pose a threat against Christianity. Or I feel this anxious need to correct people's wrong opinions about things. Because I feel like people have all of these questions regarding ideology, and if I'm somehow wise enough or verbose enough or have the right answers and I'm researched enough that somehow I'll convince these people to stop being scared. But beneath all of the ideology questions, beneath all of the political divides, beneath all of the anxiety that you see people reeling in, no matter what their questions might be to you, no matter what doubts you might see people, reeling in and stuck in, it really comes down to this. People are wondering if God cares about them. People are wondering if God loves them. People are wondering if this creator, if he does exist, does he love me? Does he care about me? Does he care what's going on in my life? And do you know what? You might not be a physicist. You might not be a philosopher. You might not be a political scientist. You might not have all of these degrees to answer all of these questions that you think people have. But guess what? You do have the answer to this main question. Does God care about me? Absolutely he does. So much so that he hung on a cross for you. He bled and he died for you. Are you kidding me? The God of the universe loves you so much. And I know you feel alone. I know you feel reeling. I know you feel caught in this tempest and in this storm. But I'm here to tell you, forget about all the ideology stuff. God loves you. And so do I. That is an answer that you don't need a degree to give. You don't need all of this research. You don't need the perfect answer to somebody's arguments. You don't need to type all that stuff that you feel like typing. God, people need to feel, like if the shoe fits, wear it, right? People need an answer to the question, do you even care? Do you even care? God, do you care? And you have that in your hand, Christian. You have that answer. The answer is in the cross. Does God love you? Yes, he does. Absolutely, he does. And so much of my anxiety regarding what's going on in culture, so much of my fears and my thoughts about where I see my generation going, all of this stuff, I'm reminded that here's Jesus speaking with the same voice that spoke light over the chaotic void, saying, peace, be still. Be still. You and I get to testify to this voice with confidence. We get to testify to the voice that says, peace, be still. We get to testify to the voice that calms the waters, that spoke life and light into existence. Because guess what? Our voices are not going to be able to calm this storm that's raging around us. And no matter how loudly we yell into the storm, nothing's going to happen. But there is one who can speak peace. There is one who can speak peace. And the next chapter, in Mark chapter 5, we see a man who's caught not in a literal storm, but a different storm of his own. In Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, it says this. Then they came to the other side of the sea. So this is after Jesus had just calmed the storm, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. This man, and it's a strange thing to create a villain out of this man. To see someone suffering in this way, a demoniac, and say, well, that's the villain and Jesus is the hero here. Does that make sense? It's an odd thing. This man's suffering. He's suffering. Bound in chains, people binding him in chains because they don't know what to do with him, and he keeps breaking them, and he's crying aloud, and his cries are echoing through the canyons and the mountains, and he's cutting himself with stones, right? If this is not an image of our culture, I don't know what is. Tormented to the point of self-harm, restless, alone, and bound. Man, so much of the loud cries that we would see as villains is really just people caught up in darkness. May we never hear the voice of the demoniac and all of a sudden villainize that person. Someone crying out with an ideology that's harmful, or someone who's caught in a cycle of self-harm or addiction, and say that something's wrong with them. They are suffering and they need Jesus. They're crying out, harming themselves, not because they want to, but they are caught in this cycle of self-hatred that will just repeat itself over and over unless they're reminded of just how loved they are. May we be people of compassion. Compassion. Conviction, to be sure, yes, but compassion. Compassion. Continuing in this, when we see this man, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshiped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." So this is the demon talking, not the man. For he said to him, "Come out of this man, you unclean spirit." And then he asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Also, he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. Now, a large herd of swine was feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, "Send us to the swine that we may enter them." And at once Jesus gave them permission, and the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. There were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and drowned in the sea. We see Jesus here doing the same thing with this man who's possessed by legion as he did to the storm. You see, this man here, although he was not caught up in a literal storm, he was caught in a storm of his own. He was caught in an inner storm. You see, there's these outer storms that we deal with, storms of culture, storms of circumstance. Tragedy can fall upon us, right? Bad things happen all around us. Culture starts to, the foundations that we thought were steady start to crumble before us. There's storms, there's chaos, there's tragedy, there's trials, right? That is an outer storm, yes? That's an outer storm, but there's also storms within. Storms that cause us to feel tormented, depressed, alone, anxious, reeling, joyless, isolated, crying out. And so maybe your storm isn't a literal, chaotic, outer storm that you're dealing with. Perhaps you this morning are not a victim of circumstance as much as your own inner thoughts and your inner feelings, and you have a storm that is raging within you. You feel unhinged in a way. You feel caught in a cycle of sin and self-harm, and you're going through your own storm. And this is a beautiful passage and encouragement for us, church, that Jesus is the master of the outer storm and the inner storm. Jesus is the master of the chaos without and within. Jesus is able to say, "Peace be still," to the waves and the rain, but he's also able to say, "Peace be still," to the heart that is tormented.